how long have you been an architect for?
Right, so, well, my father is an architect and he's retired, and when I was not much older than you guys are probably, I used to go into his office to work in the school holidays. So that was probably when I was about 14 or 15. I used to go in there and he had a big office, and they used to say things to me like, well, my shoes need cleaning, or can you scratch out this drawing, and because we used to draw on tracing paper, they would ink it, and when there was a mistake made, you had to use a razor blade or a power eraser to take off the mistake, if you like.
Yeah.
And they'd give me a whole drawing and they'd say, oh, rub that half out there, and when I'd finish rubbing that half out, then they'd say, oh, okay, rub the other half out now. so I started when I was very young, and I used to do the office cleaning, and it used to be a bit of a nuisance, and then I went on to study architecture, and I worked through my degree as a student there, and I graduated when I was about 22, so that is about 37 years ago.
Are you familiar with Berlin's architecture? If so, how do you think it compares to Brisbane?
Me, probably. Okay, yes, I've been to Berlin twice, and very exciting city to go to. It has fantastic history. Well, it has, let's say not fantastic history, it has a very interesting history, and there's evidence of that history wherever you go. They are trying to keep the old environment and to build on it, which I admire. So the Reichstag is the capital building. They decided to create a new city, new capital city being Berlin, and establish a new parliament there. And unfortunately, I didn't book to go before I went there, so I arrived and I didn't get in there, but I did look from the outside. It was very nice. There's lots of monumental buildings there, and Berlin, of course, is a cold climate, so the buildings are quite heavyweight. So, in relation to how I would contrast Berlin architecture with Brisbane, I'd say that they're very different because of the environment. So, Brisbane is in a temperate environment, so it's a warm temperate environment, so we're going to have cool weather really in June, July, and yes, we have tall buildings and we need to have a lot of structure, but we tend to design to orientate away from the western sun to try and shield the northern sun, try and allow lots of landscape to thrive, so whether that be having the land sloping at the right angle or orientated towards the sun, or make it so that it's accessible from the actual living space. So German, so I digress from that, so I was thinking more about the monumental type buildings, but if we talk about residential buildings, which I really tend to focus on a lot, in Germany and Berlin, they tend to have apartment type style buildings, and while Brisbane is in the current realms of having perhaps an oversupply of apartments, if you go to a lot of the major cities in Europe, the apartments are very common and they tend to be 5 or 6 stories. Also, the cities don't encourage too many cars, so our society is quite different in that we tend to think you've got an apartment, you need 1 car and preferably 2 if you're living in the city. So the difference being population and public transport, and so I think about Berlin, and the public transport in Berlin is fantastic. Wherever you go, you hop on a railway, the bus, and being German, they all go on time and they all go to the right place and they're signposted well and they're safe. whereas in Brisbane we tend to be, let's say, at the beginning of that phase, and we suffer because to go on public transport we have to go on 3 or 4 different types. Having said that, I use public transport here, but I don't use it going to work because I need to drive around. I like the tunnels, but we don't have them in Berlin. So, I don't know, how do you contrast all those things? So, residential in Berlin to me was mainly apartment type building and very thick walls and highly insulated and always a warm environment internally. In Brisbane, yes, we have thick walls to allow medium-rise and high-rise construction for multi-res buildings, but the buildings are typically lots of light, lots of natural ventilation. Yes, they'll be air-conditioned,